One more. Okay. Yep.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order this month's Governance and Policy Committee. As someone based in Scarborough, I'm operating in the traditional territories of many Indigenous nations. This area has been under the care of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, Mississaugas of the Credit, and any other nations that may be unrecorded. The territories that encompass Toronto are under a number of treaties, including the Toronto Purchase, the Rouge Tract Claim, and the Williams Treaty. Conversations around the Toronto Purchase Treaty began in 1787, and settlement between the Government of Canada and the Mississaugas of the Credit was only reached in 2010. This took more than 200 years due to lack of guarantee of land rights, inclusion of Indigenous voice, and proper financial compensation. This is important to highlight as it shows how slow justice has been for Indigenous peoples. I'd like to acknowledge my settler privilege and extend my solidarity to Indigenous communities whose land I continue to benefit from. Many of us came here as settlers, immigrants, or refugees. I would also like to acknowledge those who came here involuntarily as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. I'd like to remember the journey taken by them. Welcome to our committee members, Trustee Hassan, Nanziata, and Trustees Shishkandaraja and Earhart will be joining us shortly. In the room, we're joined by Trustee McLean. If there are any other trustees joining us online, I'd ask that you please identify yourselves.
Madam Chair, Trustee Wong here.
Trustee Laskin.
Trustee King.
Ernest Lynn.
John.
Trustee Williams
Student
here.
Trustee Shafkat is also here.
Welcome. Now we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. May I get a mover and seconder?
Ernest Lynn.
Okay, seconded by.
Nanziata.
Thank you. And now we'll do a show of hands or say aye, all in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to declarations of possible conflict of interest. I'll give a moment for folks to come off mute. Seeing none, we'll move on to delegations. Delegations are another form of parent and community voice to address committees of the board. This ensures members of the public provide input in the board decision-making process. Delegates are reminded that they are here to provide input in a respectful manner and may not engage in any behavior contrary to the board of conduct, the board's code of conduct, human rights policy, or delegation procedure. First up, we have Angela, who is here to speak to us about the Toronto Foundation for Student Success. Welcome, Angela.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can. Angela, you have 5 minutes to speak. We ask that once you're finished, just to hold on. There may be some questions of clarification for you from trustees.
Perfect. Just let me know when you want me to start.
Yeah, you can begin.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to address the Governance and Policy Committee. I'm here to request that TDSB please consider conducting a formal review of its relationship with the Toronto Foundation for Student Success. For those here today who may not know the history of that relationship, please let me provide a very brief summary. In 1998, TDSB set up an arm's-length charity called Toronto Foundation for Student Success, TFSS. This action purposely removed TDSB's day-to-day direct governance and management over nutrition-related programs within its 583 schools. This includes morning meal, snack, and lunch programs. Since its inception, TFSS has grown into its monopoly. Today, this organization actively works to hold on to its approximate $30 million empire. Due to this outsourced third-party governance model, TDSB school communities and TDSB staff, including TDSB nutrition liaison officers, have become powerless against TFSS. TDSB staff have created a Band-Aid solution to work around these systemic governance challenges. For example, TDSB schools are now encouraged to use board-approved, for-profit, third-party nutrition program vendors outside of TFSS's control, like Real Food for Real Kids, The Lunch Lady, and more. This board-wide recommendation poses many problems for its school communities. 1, these services are extremely expensive. 2, they provide poor quality foods and service. 3, they are not environmentally friendly. 4, they are extremely inequitable. And 5, they do not address student food insecurity, which means students are left to go hungry. When some TDSB schools have tried to create their own school community managed not-for-profit on-site hot lunch programs, TFSS has actively created roadblocks and strived to prevent them from launching. For example, approximately 5 years ago, my own school community launched its very own financially self-sufficient on-site hot lunch program. Despite successfully feeding on average approximately 250 students affordable, healthy meals, with 1 out of every 5 meals being free for kids in need, plus creating 8 paid part-time positions, hiring young adults with special needs, TFSS has continued to regularly throw up barriers, badger, and come close to harassing our lunch program. This year, a similar lunch program was launched at a TDSB inner model school. TFSS was yet extremely uncooperative and challenging to work with. Please let me express that I do believe TFSS does do good in the world, but there is room for improvement. TDSB's outsourced governance model to TFSS should be reviewed by the board to address its systemic challenges and hopefully improve overall nutrition program outcomes. The purpose of that review, 1, to determine if this arm's-length outsourced third-party managed governance model is successfully meeting both the board at large and its individual 583 school communities' existing and future needs and wants. 2, to clearly identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of granting TFSS governance over all TDSB school-operated nutrition programs. And lastly, to determine if adjustments are required to improve the outcomes of this outsourced third-party governance model. I would like to thank you again for letting me address the Governance and Policy Committee today. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Angela. Just hold on. We do have a question. Trustee Dawson, you're up first. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for your delegation. I do have a question about, the alternative to TFSS program that you said that your school had taken part in. So my understanding of TFSS, and this is just how it's run in my kids' school, is that families have the opportunity to make a donation or not toward the program. And so, but they get the same food anyway, even if they just sign the form and they don't donate. So what was the model of your program in terms of, being affordable? What does affordable mean? And then also providing free meals to students in need. What does that look like?
Sure, no problem. Great question. So one of the things that TSSS doesn't know is any of their numbers. And we're a firm believer, you need to know your numbers. You need to know how much food to cook. So for example, TSSS lunch programs often run out of food and they have to run back to the kitchen and they have to make like a sandwich really quickly. We believe that everyone who needs a meal should get a meal. So in our school, anyone who wants a free lunch service receives the free lunch service just like anyone else. But we do ask that they let the office know. No one knows. It's 100% confidential. So we know how much to cook. Our food is unlimited helpings for $5 if you can afford it. And if you can't afford it, it's free. If a student shows up to school without lunch, we don't turn them away. We still feed them, but we do strive to know our numbers. We are a firm believer that if we don't know how much food to make, then we can't make enough food. So we have a similar equity model, and that's why we have 50 kids being fed for free. And we receive no funding from TSSS, and we only get donations from President's Choice Children's Charities. So the inner city model school that we're trying to launch right now, or we have launched in TDSB with our support, is having a similar model to ours. And so far it's doing well.
Okay. Thanks very much. That's helpful.
Thank you, Trustee Dawson. Seeing no further questions, Angela, thank you so much for coming in.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to the next delegate for tonight. Michael Taper, welcome. Can you hear us?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Michael, you have 5 minutes, and to hold on, we may have some questions and clarification for you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Mike Tepper. I'm a City of Toronto resident. I wish I could say I was a former TDSB student, but that wouldn't be entirely accurate. I graduated from Earl Haig Secondary School back in 1989 when it was operated by an outfit you might remember called the North York Board of Education. Time flies. I'm here to talk to you today about the TDSB's delegation policy. I wish I could talk to you in person, face to face, and I guess that's basically the point of this. I'm dialing in like a caller on an AM radio program, cross-country checkup. Just a disembodied voice speaking into the telephone, receiving little or no response, not perceiving any reaction, gesture, or body language from the people in the room. You can't see me and I can't see any of you. For all I know, the telephone connection could have been severed and I might just have been speaking into the air for the last 60 seconds. To be really blunt about it, it's not a satisfying experience. And it's not, in my estimation, the way local democracy in Canada is supposed to work, especially when it comes to public education. I think that the TDSB understands, at least in theory, that effective public consultation is desirable. After all, the board website says that the TDSB is committed to advocacy for students, parents, and communities. We welcome members of the public to bring forward issues and concerns they have to a delegation, which is addressing a committee of the Board of Trustees by speaking or submitting a written statement. Well, that's a really noble sentiment, but the reality is that dialing in by phone really isn't all that welcoming. What makes matters worse is that the names of the delegates, the topics of the delegations aren't even published on the board's website. Committee minutes aren't published on the board's website either. So short of filing a Freedom of Information Act request, there's virtually no way anyone who's not on this call would know that I spoke to you at all or anything that I said. It's no wonder that there are so few delegations. Now, I'm at a loss for the rationale for this policy of dial D for delegation, with some apologies, I guess, to the spirit of Alfred Hitchcock. COVID right now is substantially over, thankfully. Parliament meets in person. So does the Ontario Legislature and Toronto City Council. Lots of other school boards from Ottawa to Halton to Waterloo allow face-to-face delegations and have done so for many months. Thousands of people ride the subway every day unmasked. So COVID prevention can't really be the reason. So I'll take a wild guess and say maybe it's security. Some of the meetings of the school boards in other places have been a little bit dramatic, with members of the public offering up what you might describe as Archie Bunker-style comments in their delegations about student surveys, the clothing and other accessories worn by some teachers in the classroom, books in the school libraries, whether they belong there or not, and access to student washrooms. Now, the boards involved dealt with these issues, sometimes even cutting off presentations where, in their judgment, it was necessary. There might even have been a few minutes of raucous cheering and jeering from the public gallery. Well, that's life in the big city. It's the price of democracy, and the cliche is that freedom isn't free. So I guess I'll conclude by saying that it's time to put aside the excuses and give back to the people of Toronto the right to talk to their school trustees in person. This is not a right-wing or a left-wing partisan issue. It's just a plain, simple democracy and accountability issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michael. Just give us a moment. We do have a question of clarification for you. Please go ahead, Trustee Dawson.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for your deputation. I just wanted to let you know that we just received an email from the Director of Education indicating that we will be receiving in-person delegations. So that's really excellent news. So that does address your concern. I wondered though, if you were aware that our meetings will continue as hybrid, and that typically there might only be 2 or 3 of 22 trustees present in a meeting room. If you were aware that you were not going to be speaking face-to-face to 22 trustees or even 5 trustees, would you still want to make that public delegation to a practically empty room?
I certainly would.
Okay.
I think that members of the public have the right to attend the meetings at 5050 Yonge Street and to present in person. I think that's the most desirable method, but I also recognize that Toronto is a big place. It goes from Pearson Airport all the way to the Rouge River to the zoo, and there are lots of people, thousands, who live far away from 50 Yonge Street, and therefore it's impractical or a burden for them to attend in person, but I think they should have the right. Now, you asked about the personal attendance of board members at board and committee meetings and whether that should go on. My personal opinion is that it should be required. The elected office of school trustee is not a work from home job done while wearing pajamas or a comfortable fleece hoodie from the comfort of your home office or family room. It involves dressing up a bit, getting out of the house, meeting the public, listening to their grievances, and then communicating board policies to the public. And that's not effectively done exclusively through voiceovers or Zoom meetings. So if they're physically able, I think that trustees ought to personally show up to work.
Okay, thank you. Currently, there is no legislation that requires that though, so we will continue likely to see low attendance. But I do appreciate your delegation and confirming that you would prefer to come in person irrespective of the hybrid model. So thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you, Michael. Hold on, we have another question. Please go ahead, Trustee Pei.
Okay, Ms. Pepper, thank you for delegation to the board. And I have a few questions actually. The first one will be, you mentioned that the school board in Waterloo, Halton, and Ottawa allow delegates to speak to the board in public. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the delegation procedure at other boards in Ontario?
Oh, thank you for the question, trustee. I have done a little bit of homework on the question, but I can hardly call myself an expert. In my own experience and opinion, the Waterloo board does have the best record I'm aware of in allowing for public participation. They've allowed me to delegate twice to their committee of the whole, once in an in-camera session and once in the public session. In each case, I was granted speaking time of 10 minutes and also given the opportunity to submit a PowerPoint presentation deck, which the staff very kindly put on the screen. The Waterloo board allows in-person and Zoom presentations, and every trustee is physically present in the meeting. The Ottawa board also allows Zoom and in-person presentations up to 4 minutes, and they allowed me to delegate once in the past year to an in-camera session of their committee of the whole, despite the fact that I also live in Toronto and don't even own or rent property in Ottawa. Given the population of the city of Toronto and the need for meetings to proceed efficiently, I say that the current 5-minute time limit speaking is an appropriate compromise between what they do in Waterloo and Ottawa. But I think that allowing PowerPoint slides would be a very valuable enhancement of the delegation experience for delegates, for board members, and for the public, including the media, who would have a record of what was presented. And I think that the name of each delegate, the organization they represent, if any, and the topic of the delegation should be the minimum amount of information that's recorded in the committee minutes. What I think would be even better is for the board staff to conduct a survey and make a chart about what other school boards are doing. It would be very useful for them to maybe make a chart with a row of every public and Catholic school board in Ontario in the following columns: length of permitted delegation, the notice period that's required for the delegation, whether residency in Toronto is required, what are the permissible topics, and the number of delegates allowed in any given meeting. Overall, what I would say is that the TDSB, being Canada's largest school board, ought to be Canada's leader in public consultation and the delegate experience. At this point, I have to say that unfortunately, the TDSB is falling behind, and I think that's something that requires a lot of improvement.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Travers. I have another question for you. You mentioned that the record of delegations is not reflecting the minutes of the committee, or at least on the committee agendas. Could you please elaborate a little bit about the practice of other school boards on this issue?
Sure. What I would say is that some best practices would be looking at the work of the York Region District School Board, just north of Steeles Avenue. I think they're the leader in publicly recording all the delegation requests that are submitted to that board. They publish as an appendix to the meeting of every applicable committee every single delegation request and all the written delegations. And it gives the public a very clear and transparent view of which individuals and organizations are making representations to the board's elected policymakers and what they have to say. I think it befits this board to be the national leader in terms of transparency and public input within the constraints of serving a population of 2 million people. But moreover, I think the public has a proactive right to know what's going on, who's lobbying trustees and board committees for policy changes, and what the contents of their message is. It's what open, democratic, and transparent government is all about.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Travers. I have last question for you. Are there anything you think of the board of TDSB could do or can do is enhance the public dedication experience? And what would be your suggestions?
Trustee Pei, if you could ask about his what he presented.
Okay.
So are there questions of clarification?
Okay, so I want to ask you about regarding the part you mentioned that is TDSB, the board have not been done in person delegation because of the pandemic. The pandemic is over now, so you would recommend the board trustee to come to the board and allow the public delegate themselves in person. So for this part, I think it's also the trustee also mentioned that if the delegation come to the board, but the trustee is not here, do you think it's going to be a very good experience for the delegates, or you think it's maybe there are other better practice in this way?
Well, I'd have to say that the answer to that question, in my mind, is obvious. It's not going to be a good experience for the delegate. And I think absent a viable excuse from the trustee in question, I think it's actually insulting to the delegate, to the public. Trustees are elected to their office in order to show up in person whenever they can. And when they don't, when they're absent and the public takes the time and trouble to travel to 5050 Yonge Street, and the trustee is just not there, it sends a signal that the trustee is just not interested in doing the job all the way. And maybe they'll have to answer for that at the next election based on their personal attendance record.
Madam Chair, Madam Chair, this is not appropriate.
Mr. Taper, if you can just complete what you were saying.
All right, I'll continue in a slightly different vein. What I would like to say, though, is that with respect to one of the remarks that was made earlier in this meeting, is that I think the TDSB ought to go beyond the legislative minimum. If I were to do my job according to the minimum, I would get the minimum mark and barely be able to keep my job. I think the trustees and the board in general ought to be doing more than the minimum. I think they ought to be doing their very best to exceed the minimum and to give the maximum amount of accountability and transparency that they can.
Thank you, Michael. Trustee Page, do you have any further questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Michael, for coming in. We appreciate the time that you spent.
Sorry,
on
I'm just going to interrupt. I see Trustee Hastings' hand up, actually.
Oh, sorry, I can't see the full screen. Trustee Hastings, please go ahead with your question of clarification.
My name is Dennis Hastings. I'll be very brief. I'd like to thank you for bringing this to our attention. A heartfelt thank you for bringing this to our attention. Do have a nice day. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for coming in. Up next, before we move on to our next speaker, just a reminder to trustees that delegates are here to provide their input on something happening on the board and just also that we brought forward. They are here to share their input and then here to ask questions of clarification regarding their what they share. And if we have further questions, other ways that we can continue engaging them. But this part of the process, we're just asking questions of clarification. Thank you. And next, we're welcoming Trustee Sun Lu. Sorry, Mr. Sun Lu.
Hello?
If you can press start. Oh, there we are. Hi there, welcome.
Hello?
Hi there,
Can you hear me now? Hi, can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you.
Okay.
My apologies. I apologize, Mr. My apologies for that. So you have 5 minutes to present to us. At the end of your delegation, please hold on. There may be some questions of clarification for you.
Okay. I will
go
try my
ahead.
best. It's a little hard to hear your question, actually. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, good. So I will start. Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and the Board of Trustees. My name is Lu Sun. I'm a parent of 2 TSB students. I'm very involved in my school community, serving on parent council and volunteering often for school events. I'm here today to urge the board to bring back its in-person delegation policy as part of its mandate for equitable and democratic decision-making process. As elected representatives, you have a responsibility to listen to our student, parent, and community feedback before you make decisions that impact our very lives. Having done a dial-in delegation last year, November, the process really left me feeling unheard. I had a lot of technical difficulties. At the time, my voice and the video feed did not match. So as a result, I was very thrown off by the lag and I could not focus on my discussion. And during my delegation, instead of having a chance to see what the reactions, what the receptions were, I felt that I was speaking into air and I wasn't sure if I was on time or not, and I was cut off quickly at the end. So I felt that my delegation did not matter in the slightest, and it was not a democratic process at all, and it was just going through the motion. And these board meetings are meant to be a place of public discussion, but with the current process, it feels more like a closed-door discussion. And we all know that the adoption of online communication is a COVID-19 protocol. It's a measure during extreme times. But now that that has passed and we're now moving forward toward normalizing, the board should also be returning to our in-person delegation.
Now, the private sector companies are mandating employees coming back into the office. For example, recently, RBC has asked their employee to return to work 3 to 4 days a week. And this is because they know online meeting greatly harm the quality of communication. And so it is time that we address this in our democratic process as well. And also, there are a lot of new immigrant families in our communities right now. And having that language barrier, it is a lot easier for them to have someone translating for them in person rather than online. So if we move online entirely, then we are systematically preventing their voice from being heard. So I urge you and ask the board to please consider the importance of in-person delegation to maintaining our mandate that all student, parent, and community voices are heard. And thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Sen, for coming in. Just give us one moment. There is a question of clarification for you. Trustee Dawson, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your delegation, Sen. I just wanted to let you know that we are returning to in-person delegations. So we did just get that confirmation today.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, that's everything. Thanks.
Trustee Nunziata, please go ahead with your question of clarification.
Thank you kindly for delegating. Given that trustees are representative of the working population, would you be receptive to having delegations happen near the end of the meeting so more trustees are able to attend in person? Because for trustees who are working multiple careers to make it in to 5050 Yonge Street for 4:30 to be in person is something that's not always possible. Would that be something that you would be avail to?
If I may, just to clarify, you're saying that if the trustees can come in towards later on in the evening?
Yes. Would you be open to delegations at the end of the meetings?
Yes.
Trustee Nunziata, while that is a very important question, just to maintain process, we need to make sure we're asking questions of clarification. I think this is a great question that we can ask when this is before us and we're having these conversations with staff. But at this point, just to make sure we're being fair to everyone, these are questions of clarification.
Of course. Thank you very much for delegating. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for hearing my voice. I think it's more important on the mode of communication rather than time. So I think time, we can always, if it's an issue that's important to us, we'll always find time to come and do delegation. But it's the method, right? The mode of communication is really important. We want to make sure that our messages are heard. Thank you.
Thank you, San. Moving on to the next delegate, we have Marcin Pesky speaking to the Student Interest Program Policy. Marcin, can you hear us?
If it's an issue that's important to us, we'll always find time to come and do that.
Marcin, if you can hear us, we ask that you not listen to the live stream near you because there is a bit of a lag. Hear us?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi there. Hi, welcome. You have 5 minutes to delegate tonight. At the end, we ask you to please be on the line. There may be some questions of clarification for you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak and giving me your time and attention. I want to speak about lottery admissions to specialized programs. I will discuss some data and information, some of which is new and some was obtained through FOI requests and never before revealed to the public. I'm here as a father. My daughter was lucky to be admitted in the last year of competitive exams, and she's currently in grade 9 of Max. I can see every day how happy she is to go to school, for the first time in her life not being utterly bored with her school math, or having peers who read John Steinbeck or who can dwell on the details of World War I. I'm here also because I'm worried about quality of math and STEM public education in Toronto. I'm a professor in economics at the University of Toronto, where I teach students who plan to go to graduate school. Although 1/3 of the U of T students are international, a class like mine typically has more than 70% of international students. Similar numbers show up in engineering or sciences. It is very concerning that Canadian students are not able to keep up in a top Canadian university. 1 year ago, the board changed the admission policy from merit-based to a lottery. This change affected all specialized programs, but the impact was the largest on the three most competitive STEM programs, Max, TOPS Bloor, and TOPS Marc-Garneau. Highly popular, widely successful programs with decades of experience in helping students to reach their potential. In justifying this change, TDSB claimed that they are expanding access, but they did not. The number of seats in these programs stayed exactly the same. TDSB claimed that they want to serve all interested students. There is a huge interest in accelerated math programs with 10 applicants for each seat, but TDSB has no plans to expand them. On the contrary, a FOI request revealed a 5-year plan to eliminate them completely. Without pointing to any data, TDSB said that removing merit won't affect the quality. We know now that it's false. San Francisco Special Program, Lowell High, had a similar experiment a few years ago. 1 year later, failing grades in the first-year courses increased from 8 to 24%. They went back to merit last year to protect the students. A context for the Lowell High debacle is a perception that removing academic criteria disproportionately disadvantages Asians in admissions to top programs. Famously, Harvard University is using a personality score to reduce admissions of Asian students. Similarly, TDSB pointed racial imbalances as evidence of discriminatory nature of merit. Asians are overrepresented, blacks and whites are underrepresented. However, a careful analysis showed that overrepresentation is driven by application rates. Asians are 3 times more likely to apply than whites and 5 times more likely than Black, Middle Eastern, or Latino students. This is evidence of TDSB failing to provide sufficient counseling or to develop interest in math before high school. But by killing the high school entrance exam, TDSB is not addressing the right problem. TDSB said that they want students to have a fair chance of acceptance regardless of their identity or postal code. Then why did they restrict 50% of the seats to local residents? What about identity? Because of 20% guaranteed seats and other elements of the lottery design, the lottery significantly advantages some racial identities over others. The degree of the advantage depends on the composition of the application pool. If the application pool is the same as in the past, I can calculate that a Black, Latino, or Middle Eastern applicant will have a 4 times higher chance of getting admitted to Max or TOPS than others. 4 times higher. Now, I have a colleague from Puerto Rico. TDSB will not ask him about his income, his immigration status, education, job title. All of those are the same as mine. But because he's a Latino, his daughter is 4 times more valuable than mine. 4 times more than a child of a Ukrainian plumber, Chinese dentist, Nepalese cleaning maid, Sri Lankan baker, or MPP from Tibet. It is possible and just to have merit-based admissions that promote equity, inclusion, and human rights, correct for disadvantages affecting many TDSB students, and provide all high-potential students with appropriate education. There is no reason to think that the changes to specialized programs had these intentions in mind. I encourage you to reverse them.
Thank you, Marcin. Just give me one moment. Are there any questions of clarification? Trustee Pei, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Ms. Pesky, for delegating to the board. I have a few questions for you. The first one would be, you said that some students have 4 times higher chances being admitted than others to the specialty program. Can you explain why?
Sure. Thank you very much for this question. So I need to explain how the algorithm works. So the algorithm has 20% of protected seats for the underserved Black, Indigenous, Latino, and Middle Eastern groups. And this number, 20%, roughly corresponds to the share of these groups in the TDSB census, which is 19%. And the remaining 80% of the seats will be allocated through the random lottery, from which the underrepresented groups are also able to participate. So they have 2 chances of getting a seat from both stages. The second feature of the design is that historically, at least, in the historical data, the underserved community apply at much smaller rate. So, you know, in 2019, there were around 7% of the applicants to Max, TOPS, Bloor, and TOPS Garneau were from this Black, indigenous, Latino, and Middle Eastern community. Only 7%. So now the way that the algorithm is going to work, if the application pool is exactly the same as it was in 2019, it's going to, so there are like roughly 100 seats in Max. 20 of them will go to this self-identified group. Now, according, looking at these numbers in application pools, there is around.
I'm so sorry. Point of order. Point of order. Is this factual information? I mean, is this still a part of a delegation? I'm feeling very uncomfortable with the mentions of race and otherwise. So just point of order, if you could address that.
So this is a question to me?
No, it's to the chair. No, Pesky. It's just when we have delegations that come in, they are reminded, as I mentioned before, to not speak of anything that goes against the board's code of conduct. So when you're mentioning specific numbers related to specific groups, it needs to be numbers that are backed. So perhaps you can maybe redirect your answer and not point out any specific group or based on race, gender, or abilities.
So, Trustee, this is the information that I received through requests from TDSB. These are the numbers from the census and the information about the applicant's gender and race. I think they're actually quite relevant. But in any case, I have sent you my analysis. The only thing that I wanted to add is that this 4 times higher chance of being admitted is something that strongly relies on data from historical data from 2019 applications. If those historical application data are repeated, then it will be 4 times higher. But I strongly suspect that the application pool under the lottery will be different for many reasons, and it's not clear in which direction it's going to change. So the statistic that I'm quoting is going to be different.
Thank you, Mr. Pesky. I have another question for you. You said it as it's possible to support equity and inclusion goals with a merit-based admission system. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, so, you know, like the goal of the program should be to identify and target high potential students. And it is clear that disadvantaged backgrounds may have lower performance on the exam, especially if the exam is very competitive, like it is the case in Max and TOPS. And I can comment on that. Like, I was strongly involved in preparing my daughter, and I definitely know that there were some elements of the exam which are problematic. I tweeted on it. I tried to discuss it with my trustee at certain moment. However, this correction is possible. It's called affirmative action. And in fact, I know that it was done. And just to give you an example, the problem with differential application rates that is so visible across the races is also true across gender. It is very disappointing, but it's also well known that at this age, girls feel lower confidence in their math ability. Maybe it's not just this age. And we know that they apply.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. This deputation is against our code of conduct. It is crossing the line.
I'm a little bit confused. Why?
Mr. Pesky, give us one moment. Trustees, I know this is, there's a lot being shared right now. When it comes to delegations, they're able to speak on something that's on the agenda, but also relevant to this committee's mandate. And that's why the delegates that are speaking today were invited to share. What I ask of all trustees is if you have questions of clarification, that you ask it pertaining to what was shared, but not as something for them to continue over their time and further elaborate. This applies to everyone. So please, there are questions of clarification based on what was shared, but not opportunities to elaborate on something that wasn't already shared. going forward. And this is something I'm sharing with everyone. And to delegates, please be mindful of what is being said in a respectful manner. So Mr. Pesky, was there something did you want to finish off what you were saying, or?
Yeah, I apologize for if I said something that was wrong, but I'm not exactly sure why I violated code of conduct. I wanted to explain that the application rates of girls and boys are different, and this is actually a concern. This is something that TSB should be worrying about. That's a very important issue. And that nevertheless, the admission to those programs was on par with the share of boys and girls in TDSB. So it was very important that those programs had information about gender, but they did not have information like self-identification of race or other socioeconomic categories. So this was the argument. This was to explain to trustee who asked the question that it is possible to have correction for disadvantages, so in this case, low confidence within the merit-based admission.
Thank you. I have last question for you, Mr. Pesky. You list several inconsistent between the approach that the TDSB takes to the specialized program and our stated goals. What's the reason for this inconsistency?
Trustee Payne, that's not a question of clarification.
Yeah.
So this is relating to what was already shared in his delegation and not leading the delegate towards answering or sharing something further to that. So if there's something that he shared specifically in his delegation that you'd like to speak about or ask questions about, then sure, this is the opportunity to do so. Okay, so.
Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Laskin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A question of clarification to the delegate. Do you not believe all students can achieve?
I absolutely believe that all students can achieve. Thank you very much for this question. I strongly believe it. Like I love math. I teach my kids at home. Like I love talking to math to everybody who can, and I really think that all kids should learn quality math.
Trustee, one moment. Trustees, again, these are questions of clarification. Please do not lead the delegate. So if you have a
my question of clarification was, he mentioned a number of times that only certain groups of students were high achieving or high performance. So my question of clarification.
I never said anything like this. I'm sorry for this. I never said anything like this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Dawson, please go ahead with your question of clarification.
Thank you for the delegation. Were you aware that, given some of the points you made about the lack of applications from girls, were you aware that under this new policy, there are spots reserved for girls? Specifically?
Can I talk about it? Because last time somebody questioned that I'm violating code of conduct.
The question was, were you aware of the fact that there are spots under the new policy available to girls? Were you aware of
I'm absolutely aware of that, and I just wanted to bring to your attention.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Hastings, do you have a question? Or is your hand up from our
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Sorry about that.
Okay,
I do have a question to you, Chair, to the delegate. You've read a number and pieces of data. Did you bring that? Is that data readily available to be disseminated to us, the trustees? We'd love to see that. And I thank you for showing up on telephone as a delegate. Thank you.
Thank you for this kind words. Yes, I didn't realize actually it's my first time talking to TDSB that the committee is attended by so many trustees. I've shared my analysis with with all the trustees in the committee. Now, my analysis has pictures that rely on the data that I obtained from TDSB. It does not have actual numbers. I'm very happy to put those numbers in the appendix at the very end, and I'm going to resend it again to every single trustee, if that's okay with you.
Thank you, Mr. Pesky. And Trustee Hastings, the delegation was shared with trustees, at least with the Governance and Policy Committee trustees. We'll make sure that all trustees have access to it. It's also on
I thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pesky, for coming in. We're going to move on to our final delegation for tonight. Anurag Singhal, are you there? Okay, they are not there, I believe. If they do show up prior to the end of the meeting, we'll make sure to hear from them. I want to thank all of our delegates for tonight, and thank you for trustees for the questions they asked. Next, we're going to move on to our staff report. We only have one on the agenda tonight. Review of policy PO 1017, phase 5 in our session of policy P6, architect selection. And to speak on this,
through the chair, I would ask Senior Manager Chris Gitters to address this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm bringing forward this evening revisions to the purchasing policy, which has been a little while since it's last been updated. So we have quite a few content changes that we wanted to make at this time, as well as it was due for review anyway. I can quickly go through some of those significant content changes now, if that is helpful to the committee, and then we'll be available for any questions you may have after that. So some of the key content changes include incorporating relevant policy statements that are within our department's internal documents, such as general requirements under the competitive bidding process and non-competitive purchasing processes, introducing into the document total cost of ownership model, the relationship of purchasing to board priorities, including stewardship of board resources, adding provisions relating to suppliers, what the expectations are of them, vendor of record process, those types of things. Expanding collaborative purchasing section with information on cooperative purchasing, and by that we mean working with other entities where we cluster our requirements together, or using other entities such as the Ontario Education Collaborative Marketplace or the Government Ontario's vendor of record list as well, which they do encourage us to use based on their current initiatives to centralize procurement at the provincial level. So they do encourage us to use those types of collaborative procurement methods wherever we can. We've also included some general statements around public tender and proposal process. We want to make sure the policies align with the Canadian Free Trade Agreement, which was formerly the Internal Agreement on Internal Trade, but was updated to the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. So we want to make sure that's in alignment. And also the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, which is agreements public entities are required to comply with respect to making opportunities available to European vendors potentially. There are guidelines around when that can happen and how that's to happen, with efforts at the federal level to create a single point of contact where they'd be able to find those opportunities in Canada through one point versus trying to find all the different public entities within the country to bid to search them out on their own. So that's not there yet. There isn't that federal portal yet, and that's something the provinces and the federal government are working on. Revised expanded rules around bid posting periods, the evaluation criteria that are used when we post public procurement documents, and posting of contract award information, vendor debriefing, bid dispute procedures. Much of this is in the broader public sector procurement directive, so it's making sure we're compliant with the directive and having those statements in place. Incorporating, as I said, the broader public sector directive as necessary. Many of these things will make sure that we are up to date and compliant with what the directive requires. Enhancing the accountability section, including introduction of code of ethics and conflict of interest, which actually is part of the directive too. We should have an acknowledged and accepted code of ethics and conflict of interest within all our procurement processes and documents. And we've also included some environmental purchasing considerations as criterion for procurement and equity considerations as part of the purchasing criteria. So with that said, and there's one other, part of this policy, the recommendation is also to merge with the architect selection policy. So if this policy moves ahead, the architectural selection policy would be rescinded and it would be embedded within the purchasing document rather than a standalone policy. That's kind of the highlights of the significant change to the policy. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those down.
Thank you, Senior Manager Ferris. First, we have Chair Turner-Lynn. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Raji. Thank you, Chair Rajakulasingam. Is there an echo?
Lightly, yeah.
Okay, I think it's that room. We had this problem yesterday too. I have a bunch of questions about this actually that pertain to the change in having a trustee as part of the procurement process for an architect for a firm on school buildings, which are essentially.
Okay.
Are we able to fix the echo?
Give us one moment. Chair Lynn, it's okay in this room. We're able to hear you.
Okay, because I was hearing something else. So okay, let's try this again.
I was talking when I talked to.
So it's just a temporary interruption.
Sorry. I was talking to.
No worries. All good. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so I am concerned about the section on context in the purchasing policy review at the beginning that talks about the fact that we are removing trustees from, like, if there is a new school being built in your ward, for example, trustees used to have a spot on the procurement committee in choosing an architect. And there's a reference to the fact that this decision to change this is, sorry, the feedback is really annoying to listen to.
I don't think it's on our end. You're pretty clear over here.
Yeah,
Are other trustees hearing it?
I can hear the
feedback
when you speak. I can hear an echo.
Like, I've been on Zoom all day. I haven't had this problem except on this meeting. So I'll try to keep going, but it's frustrating to listen to. So there's a section on where we say that we've made that, staff is recommending that change because of an integrity commissioner recommendations of May 5th, 2022. But I went back through our agendas to see when that report was done because I had no recollection of it. And there is no public report that was ever brought to trustees. When I asked about it early this morning, I got a response late today that it was a report from staff that staff asked for from the integrity commissioner that has not been shown to trustees. So I guess my first question is, what was the reason for seeking that report? Has there been a problem with having trustees on this? Was there a complaint that was raised about trustees that we weren't made aware of?
Through the chair, it's the role of the integrity commissioner is not only just to hear complaints, it's also to provide advice and guidance on anything related to trustee code of conduct or ethics and those type of issues. So staff approach the integrity commissioner seeking advice as the staff members were looking at updating the policy. So no, did not result from a complaint specifically, just advice.
Okay, well, in my opinion, this is something that trustees should have been made aware of. I think it's something trustees should have some input on. I'm curious to read the Integrity Commissioner's report on this. And I actually think we should be able to weigh in on this. From my perspective, when we're talking about building new schools, these are community buildings. They're almost like public buildings. I know they belong to the TDSB, but these are public dollars that are being spent on buildings. And I think the community input that we bring as trustees is at least something to be discussed. So I think in light of that, I would like to refer this back to staff to have it brought back to us with that report so that we can understand why it is staff are making this recommendation based on advice from the Integrity Commissioner about us, because we haven't seen that. So I guess I'd like to move a motion to refer this back to staff to include the report from the Integrity Commissioner.
I can second that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor. Associate Director just wants to make a response to what Carolyn had shared.
Through the chair, I'm just quickly chatting with the staff here. We're happy to take the report back and return with a copy of, and I should clarify, it's not an Integrity Commissioner report. It's a 2-page letter, just setting out his advice. So certainly that can be shared. And we can certainly take that back and add that and hopefully address that particular issue. Thank you.
There's an amendment on the floor, a motion on the floor. So on referral, Trustee King, is that a comment that you wanted to make?
Through the chair, no, it's not. I was commenting on the echo earlier.
Trustee Laskin, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not a member of the committee, but highly support referral. And I must say, in all my years of being a trustee, this is the very first time there has ever been a referral that staff has asked an Integrity Commissioner for something about trustees that has not been shared in advance with trustees. I was not aware that one of the roles of the Integrity Commissioner was to answer these kinds of requests from staff. That is not laid out in the mandate of the Integrity Commissioner on our website. That is not in his response of his main duties. My understanding is he can deal with staff requests, but it's only about trustees' behavior vis-a-vis the code of conduct. So unless there was an issue of a trustee's code of conduct on one of these architectural selection committees, I do not understand on what authority staff asked for advice from the Integrity Commissioner. And I am wondering, Madam Chair, if that question could be asked to staff.
Through the chair, we can, it's our understanding that that is one of the Integrity Commissioner's responsibilities. We can certainly as well address that when the matter comes back to this next committee. My understanding of this report, if you want that particular question answered, we can certainly do that in the next report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, I'm not a member of this committee, but I do not support the removal of a trustee as part of the architect selection when a school is the local trustee from the architect selection process whatsoever. I have had experience in this. I'm one of the fortunate ones to actually have had experience in this, being part of several committees. And I do not support that removal. And further on referral, if staff are asking questions, I'd really like to know what is the role of staff vis-a-vis the Integrity Commissioner in terms of advice, because I have not had any experience that staff again can ask advice of the Integrity Commissioner outside of code of conduct issues. So I would also like an understanding of that authority and if the mandate of the Integrity Commissioner is changing. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Next, we have Trustee Wong. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to share a very, very recent experience in terms of architect selection process. And I was not able to make it, but I was very puzzled as well. At that point, when I was informed, I was being the trustee that I'm going to be just an observer in the process instead of a member of that selection team, which was something that I had experience of previously with another school. So I want to share with you. And when I read about the agenda for today's meeting, I was again, I would say, got puzzled again how it could be enforced without going through the committee and the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Wong. Trustee Sriskandaraj, please go ahead.
Sorry, it takes me a while to get off mute. Through the chair, I just want to echo Trustee Laskin's concerns. This is also news to me. And as a person who sat on the committee that hired the Integrity Commissioner, never was it our mandate, or we were not notified that we would be hiring someone who would also be giving staff advice on these sort of matters to related to trustee's role in this capacity, as well as, I don't know if, if this is operation matter. So what I'm trying to say is that the reach of the Integrity Commissioner seems to be far more reaching than the intent when we were engaged in the hiring process, which would have obviously informed how we went about that process. So I am also very concerned and also about this and the fact that we're just hearing about this report now, especially if it's coming out of not an actual complaint or concern. So I appreciate the referral and I look forward to seeing what this letter actually says. But I think we need to also take that with a little bit. We'll see what, I don't want to be presumptuous of what's in this letter, but just, to share my thought that we need to take it with a little bit of grain of salt, because that was not the intention when we made the hire. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Trustee Sriskandaraj. Just a reminder, we are on referral. So we're speaking to refer, that's the motion on the floor right now. And up next, we have Trustee Pei.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much. It's really hard for me to listen to other trustees, discussion, because I don't know whether we can improve the quality of this meeting. First of all, all the dedication is so hard for me to follow. I had to really work hard, try to listen carefully, but there's so many echoes. I just don't know whether we can improve the quality of this meeting. It's really hard to follow, to be honest. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Pei. Yep, we're working on it. All the mics are off in the room and we're trying as hard as we can. Maybe next time we can go back to the boardroom. Yeah, I think it's just the room itself. We've tried everything we can with turning the mics off.
Yeah.
We've nothing else we can do.
Yeah,
So we're speaking to the motion right now on the floor. Seeing no further comments or questions, we'll open. Oh, Trustee Hastings, do you have a question? You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
Did you have a question or comment, Trustee
That
Hastings?
this is very, very irregular. And I have to say, I'm in favor of bringing that to board. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further comments or questions, we'll open the vote on this item.
Sriskandaraj in favor.
Sean in favor.
Vice Chair Sean in favor, Trustee Sriskandaraj in favor, Trustee Rajagopal Singh in favor.
Yeah, Trustee Bean in favor.
Hastings in favor.
Nunziata in favor of the referral.
Trustee Nunziata in favor.
I voted online on eScribe in favor.
Trustee Hassan in favor.
Thank you, Chair Nelson, and thank you, Trustee Hassan. She shared that she was in favor. He was in favor as well. In favor. And that is carried. Thank you to Senior Manager Paris for this report. Up next, we have 2 items for information only. Are there any questions that folks have for 6.1 kindergarten to grade 12 new student registration? Okay, seeing no questions on that item. Moving on to the next item, that's for information only, promotion, transfer, and retention, grade 8 to grade 9. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Okay, none. Trustee Pay? Oh, we're gonna move on to, before we go to adjournment, any other items?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a motion to move and will be seconded by Trustee Ivan Hassan.
I believe this is a notice of motion.
That's right.
Sure. So it's coming for notice today and
Yes.
it will be up for discussion at the next GPC.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Yes, the topic is the in-person delegation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Pay. Next, adjournment. May I get a mover and second here? Trustee Pay, seconded by.
Trustee Hassan.
Thank you, Trustee Hassan. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you at the next one.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
It's done. Speak to the TV.
Yeah.